We will start picking up now on our fourth of our 5-week series on the promises of God. I hope this has been a rich experience for you. It's been a lot of fun for me. I hope it's been eye-opening to understand that we serve and love a God who makes promises and keeps his promises to us. It behooves us to understand what is it exactly that God has promised. I think some of the benefits of this are, one, we really get to know the heart of God really well by knowing what kind of relationship he wants for his people. Also, we get to know that there's a preventive power. Knowing that God has told us, if you find yourself in this situation, this is what you can count on from me. It changes our behavior. It changes the way we think. It changes the choices that we make, the behaviors that we engage in. And also, of course, we get a chance to see in the promises of God the fulfillment of his mighty arm in action. Delivering, protecting, opening doors for his people as he has promised. It's really important for us to understand the promises that he has made, things that he has said to his people. You can count on this from me. Would that make a difference to you? It makes a difference to me. This week we're going to call up the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, now we're in business. I'd like to read for you a quote. I will not immediately identify who is the speaker of the quote, but this person, a 20th century figure whose name you will recognize, has said, "I don't think there is anyone who needs God's help and grace as much as I do. Sometimes I feel so helpless and weak." Can you identify with that? Was I quoting you on that one? Okay. How many people was I quoting on this? Okay, can you identify with this? Somebody, do you ever feel like the forces I am up against here are just too big for me? I don't have the strength. I can't do this one more day. I can't even hang in there. And God, where are you in the midst of this? Where is your mighty arm strong to deliver? And Lord, I'm asking you to take this away. I can't deal with this stressful situation. I can't deal with this person. I can't deal with the poverty. I can't deal with the illness that that's bestraddling me right now that I have to deal with. Would you just take this away? Have you ever prayed like that? I know I have. Billy Graham, good guess. Would you believe? It could have been Winston Churchill. Can you believe it was Mother Teresa? Can you believe that the great saints have all had this to deal with, have all had this experience in their lives? I suspect that this pitiful soul, who turns out to be Mother Teresa, who experienced the providence and power and the door-opening experience of following the living God, also, can you believe that she also dealt with this day in and day out? I'm too small. Literally, she was like 4'9", I think. Yeah, but figuratively speaking too, she was a little person. There were 500 million starving people, sick people in India to deal with, and she didn't have the resources to be able to deal with that. She had to depend on God day in and day out. Many times she asked, I have to imagine, she asked, will you supply this? Will you? And often we've all done that, right? And sometimes God will give you an extraordinary answer to prayer, and you just go, wow, look at this. And I have plenty of stories of God's providence to share, and I'm sure many people here do as well. But sometimes his answer is not that. And that's what we're going to be exploring here this morning. The Apostle Paul understood where Mother Teresa was coming from. His promise is, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. We're going to look at the context in which he was giving that promise from God. These were actually words from God to him in response to Paul's prayer, please take this away from me. We're going to look at the context, and then we're going to dig deep and take a look at the promise itself. Donna's not here, so we're going to have to pick another volunteer to read loud so everybody can follow along. Can somebody read this scripture passage from 1 Corinthians 12 for us? If you would, please. That would, okay, please. I've heard that before.
I must go on boasting. Although there is nothing to be gained, I will go on to vision 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise. He heard inexpressible things, things that man is not permitted to tell. I will boast about a man like that, but I will not boast about myself, except about my weaknesses. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say. To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let's revisit this. Here's the situation. Paul finds himself. This is Paul he's talking about, though he's saying it. I know a guy who had this experience. We know he's talking about himself. He was no doubt in prayer and worship one day, and he had. We don't know. He doesn't know. Was it a vision? Was he actually transported from this world into the throne room of God? He says that he was in paradise. He got a chance to see things he's not going to talk about. These things are not to be expressed. These things are unutterable. What do you think he experienced? What do you think he saw? I mean, he saw the Father sitting on the throne. He saw the Son at the right hand, the risen Lord and Savior. He saw the throng of worshipers. He was at the center. This is where it's all happening. What was that? What was that song from Hamilton? In the room. What was it? What was it? In the room where it happens. Yeah, it's like he was in the room where it happens. He saw angels, regiments of angels. Tell us where to go. Tell us what to do. Give us a command. He saw worshipers fulfilling their lifelong dream. They're experiencing paradise. Do you think that would change you? What do you think that would be like? Now, me, I have to use my imagination because I've never even been invited on the tour of the outhouse, of heaven. But Paul was there in the room where it happens. What effect do you think that would have on you? I think it would be life-changing. In what ways? Yeah. 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 Yes. We see as through a glass darkly, but everything's going to be revealed to us. We'll see. He's seeing it all. He's at the center. He's at the core of the universe, where God thought and spoke all that is into being. Do you think that would strengthen your faith? Do you think that would strengthen you when you deal with things day in and day out? You would know God has the power to take care of this. Yeah, what do you think, Tom?
Chuck Colson once said, it always stuck with me because it was so persuasive. He was such a persuasive apologist. He said that one of the most convicting things was of apologetics was exactly what you just said. That the people who had known Jesus and seen Jesus, even upon the threat of death, were unable to deny him.
Yeah.
And he likened it to his Watergate experience, how everyone who was threatened with penalty, John Dean, other people,
they caved.
They caved.
Yeah.
They all caved as soon as penalty came into the picture. And for the people that had known Christ personally, they could not cave because they knew the risen Lord.
Yeah.
I thought that was very, very impactful
Yeah.
thought.
So here's Paul. I know where I'm going. I know the truth that I'm proclaiming. I've seen it with my own eyes. I know the destination that I'm going to. Do you think that would be a strength? Do you think you would be stronger facing difficulties? It was a tremendous strength. Do you think it would strengthen your faith to know that God is so powerful? There's nothing he cannot do. I can see he has armies of angels waiting upon his bidding. God can handle this. He can take care of this just like that if he wants to. Yeah, Don.
Maybe just as impactful as the experience itself would be the fact that he's walking every day with the God who did that for him.
Yeah.
You would say, Lord, you did this for me. Who am I? It would connect his relationship with the Lord even stronger.
Yeah.
Even if it
Yeah.
wasn't an amazing experience.
Yeah.
But it was, and it was because of his closeness with the Lord.
Yep.
God's choosing to do that for him.
Yep. I would think so. God has shared some really great grace with him that is going to change the rest of his life. He finds himself, I mean, you come back, you're changed when you have that kind of experience. And shortly after this experience, he experiences this messenger of Satan, he calls it. God didn't do this. Satan's like, hey, I'm still in the picture and I'm not done yet. Gives him what he calls a thorn in the flesh. If you do your research, you'll find that there are scores of explanations. Scholars, people that think they know what the thorn in the flesh is, like the mere fact that there are scores of people that think they know what the answer is tells you we don't know what the answer is. There's good reason. My personal guess is that we read in one place he was stoned outside the city limits and left for dead. And after that, he apparently had to. I think it was in Galatians that the people, when he went to that city, the people actually had to bring him in. He apparently had spells where he couldn't see very well. Some people have guessed that maybe it's epilepsy. We don't know. Possibly, I would say chances are it was some sort of physical disability that visited him periodically. But we don't really know what it was, but he calls it, this is a thorn in the flesh. He has to deal with this. So his instinct, my instinct would be, get on your knees, Lord, would you take this away? Surely you don't want this for me. I'm obedient. I'm faithfully doing what you've called me to do, and now this is making it harder. Really? God, would you just take this away? I would like to have installed a little surveillance camera in his prayer room. I wondered if he was like a table pounder, like, Lord, would you take this away? Or I wonder if he wept. Lord, how can you expect me to endure this? I can't bear this. This is too hard for me. Surely you could sweep this away like that. And what was God's answer? His answer was, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. I want us to think about this for a minute. It's not unreasonable for Paul to ask, would you take this away? There are times where God's answer to that is yes. Now, God's answer in this particular case is, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. That is, I've already given you the grace that I'm going to give you, and it's enough for your circumstances. What you're dealing with, that is part of my will for you. And you'll find out that even my weakness that I've given you is a strength. We'll talk about that in a minute. This really challenges, I think, the way we think about strengths and weaknesses. Paul's strength here was, wow, God has given me a glimpse of eternity. I have seen the throne room. I've seen the power and the grace and the love of God. I know these things are true. These things that I was seeing through a glass darkly. Now I've seen, as clear as can be, right here, right in front of my face. Now, generally, by the way, what are we supposed to do when God's given you a strength? Use it for Him. Yeah. Paul says in Romans 12, the same guy says, if a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it is serving, let him serve. God's given you that strength for a reason. He wants you to, it's going to serve His purpose for you to have and use that strength. Is it possible that God might allow you to deal with a weakness that you will find out will become a strength for you. I've already given you the grace that you need. It is sufficient. The grace I've already given you is sufficient, and you'll find that my power is made perfect in weakness. The perfect there is telestai, the Greek word, which is related to, basically, it has the same root word as John 19, where Jesus says, "It is finished." The image here is like when you're pumping up your gas tank, and it's filled up, it's complete, it's in the Greek perfect, and the gas starts to come out over the lip. Like, I've given you as much as you can, that's it. There's no more to be given. It's complete, it's finished. We've taken it to the nth degree, and any more than that is going to cause a problem. It'll ruin the grace that I'm giving to you. We'll look at, in fact, there are problems sometimes that accompany strength. Oswald Chambers says, an unguarded strength can be a double weakness. An unguarded strength is a double weakness. I saw a hand back here. Did you want to share something with us? Yes. I think so. I've done that. Maybe so. And I think that's a good observation. That is true. 3 times is sometimes meant in Hebrew. Numbers sometimes mean numbers, and sometimes they have another meaning. Sometimes 3 is the number of completion, like as many times as possible. So that's very possible, and I think it's very possible that he was continually going back. How about now? I'm going to revisit this, Lord. I'm not going to let it go. It's like a dog with a bone, that may have characterized his prayer life for quite some time. I'd like to think about for a minute, like, maybe strengths aren't always strengths. How can the strength become a weakness? Maybe, I wonder if anybody here has ever had lifeguard training. Anybody ever been, okay. Were you ever prepared or told about, or did you ever have an experience going to rescue somebody who couldn't rescue herself, but wasn't ready to give up? How do you deal with that? Is that a problem? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, yes. Yes, yeah. They can't rescue themselves. What they should do is just go limp and let you rescue them. They're actually going to mess it up by trying to do whatever they can do. They can't save themselves. That's a problem. They have to be able to feel comfortable with their Savior coming and rescuing them and doing the heavy lifting, doing the work. Their strength becomes a weakness. Another example. Maybe we all know of a historic great church where God has done wonderful things there, moved powerfully for generations, and now there are like 200 people or 50 people worshiping in that church. And at some point in that long distinguished history of that church, where they saw God doing amazing, powerful things in the ministry of that church, they got to feel like, wow, well, we're going to start a new program over here, and they start relying on, we know how to do ministry. We know these programs. We know what it takes, and they began thinking they were doing these wonderful things for God, rather than they would have been much better off if they had the mindset, the accurate mindset that we are poor, we are powerless, thinking like Mother Teresa, and I'm totally dependent on God. If God does not show up and do his thing, we can't accomplish anything. Your strength can become a weakness. Sometimes our strengths can actually get in the way. My daughter was very, very bright. She was a quick learner. She had a sharp mind, and she just breezed through school. She just would come home with report cards. I would take 2 seconds and look at grades. Weren't very important to me. I would notice, oh, she got all A's again. Okay, that's nice. And I would tell her, the grades aren't very important. What I really care is that you learn and that you put the effort into it. And I really appreciate this. And obviously, you're doing a great job here. But I was a little afraid because I realized she picked up things so fast that someday she was going to have an assignment, she was going to have a project, or she was going to get the work that was expected of her. Would get to the point where she would actually have to develop like a work ethic and sit down and have to think things through, and she would have to labor and struggle. She was not equipped for that. She was so used to it's automatic for her. She was so smart. And in 10th grade, it happened. Okay, she got to the place, she came home with a report card. I did my 2-second scan. That's not, oh, wait a minute. The grades were not looking so good, meaning she's getting B's, which isn't bad, right? But this is not the norm for her. And I had watched her bringing her books home and taking all of 2 minutes to read her assignment, which had always been adequate for her before. It was not apparently adequate for her now. So we had a little daddy-daughter sit-down conversation. And she was defending, but Daddy, I'm working very hard. I don't think you are. I don't think you know what that means. And there were tears and gnashing of teeth in the Jamison household for quite some time. For the rest of the year, we kind of had this ongoing battle going on, and it was unresolved. The next year, all of a sudden, she's coming home, she's bringing home, she's getting all A's and really thriving and doing well. Either they started giving her much easier assignments, or she was getting this right. Now, she never said to me, she said to Kim, Daddy was right. I really wasn't working last year. But and by the way, she's developed a tremendous work ethic, and which she carries into her job and other things. She knows how to attack something. She's willing to roll up her sleeves and do the hard. I'm actually far prouder of her for her work ethic than I was for the fact that she was given a strength. She was given a gift from God of being really, really quick, but learning the work ethic and applying herself and rolling up her sleeves, that was a choice she had to make. And it would have been very easy for that strength to start to work against her. The fact that she was used to things, just being able to solve and be able to learn things like that. And that's not always the answer. There's sometimes where that will come back and bite you. That's not the way to do it. That will get you only so far. Sometimes your strengths can get in the way. They can become your weakness. Paul, from this vision in heaven, that could have given him a conceited ego. That could have inflated his own self-estimation. That could have made him decide, wow, I'm really somebody. Now I can really go and do ministry together, rather than Mother Teresa's understanding that I'm weak, I'm humble. I really need to call on God for his grace. That's when you begin to see God moving in power, rather than him. Oh, if you want to do that, then you go ahead and do that. See how far you get. Good luck with that. This is why Paul can say, when I am weak, then I am strong. Let me give another example. I don't know how many people have you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath, which is a secular book, actually. Okay, yeah. Love that book. I discovered it just a couple years ago. He tells a story about a university that they're doing a major fundraising campaign. Universities are always doing major fundraising campaigns, and they bring in their wealthiest, most successful alumni. These are people that have made millions in the marketplace. And they're doing their dog and pony show. They're kind of showcasing one after another. They're having a little gathering, and they're bringing in their star faculty, and the faculty get a chance to talk about, well, my area of research is astrophysics, and I've recently been viewing Pluto, and I developed this new theory of space and time. And they brought in the next faculty member, who actually her research was in studying learning disabilities. And Gladwell tells us, she comes in and she hadn't planned to do this, but she just kind of asked the silliest question you can imagine. She says, I wonder, she's looking at this room of uber successful multimillionaires. Everything they have touched seemingly has turned to gold. And she says, I wonder if there's anybody in this room who's ever suffered from a learning disability. And then she thought, like, How absurd was that question, you know? And would you believe that about half the hands in the room went up? A far higher proportion than in the general population. You would think people who had a learning disability, who even opening up a book and reading a chapter for an assignment or writing a paper was a struggle, was a very difficult task for them to accomplish. How could they go on and be phenomenally successful? Even this person who had made it her life research to research learning disabilities was blown away by this. She decided, I have to find out. Why is that? Is this a random, a random thing, or is it really that way that often people who are super successful have had struggles and have had to overcome? And Gladwell talks about the research coming out of it and discovering that, as you can imagine, a lot of people who have to deal with learning disabilities are squashed by that. It's hard. It's a terrible burden. It's like 5 times harder for them to complete an assignment than anybody else. And yet, there's a disproportion of a high percentage of people who are very successful who had to go through that struggle, had to overcome. And their conclusion was that that the side benefit, sometimes the normal way that everybody else would go to try to solve a problem or finish this project, they weren't able to do that. They had to find a workaround, a brilliant, ingenious solution to get to the goal. Other people had an easier way to do it. I have to find a different way. And often their workaround was so ingenious, it was better than what everybody else was doing. They discovered in their workplace a better way to do something that was unconventional. It didn't follow the conventional wisdom. And they turned upside down their industry because of what they learned. They wouldn't have learned if they didn't have to develop that workaround. Do you follow what I'm saying? For example, other researchers started researching this. Marvin Eisenstadt in the 1960s, a psychologist, he started interviewing creative innovators. That would be, poets, musicians, entrepreneurs, artists, and he found he interviewed and studied 573 eminent people. He found that 45% of them had had at least one parent die by the age of 20. Talk about disabilities, disadvantages. I'll tell you what, when you're at an impressionable age, when you're in your formative period of life, to lose one or both parents is about as tough as it gets. You didn't have all the support. You didn't have all of the supervision. You didn't have all the input that parents that you should have had a right to have access to. That wasn't there for you. If I were to choose one way, if I were evil-minded and wanted to impair the next generation, I would say, let me take away at least one parent for little kids growing up. And he found that of these 573 eminent people, 45% of them, almost half of them, had this incredibly difficult situation they had to find a way to overcome. Historian Lucille Ironmonger, writing a history of the United Kingdom's prime ministers, found that 67% of the prime ministers, 2/3 throughout history of the prime ministers had lost one or more parents by the age of 16. How about on this side of the pond? How about the United States? How about American presidents? Can you believe 12 of the first 44 lost their fathers while they were young? This doesn't even include like Abraham Lincoln, who lost his mother. This is only losing the fathers. 12 of 44, far higher than the national average. Now, is it possible that when you, in your weakness, you have to deal with how am I going to survive? How am I going to make it when I've been dealt this really terrible hand? Is it possible that some people are crippled for life from this? No doubt about it. But some people decide, I'm going to have to find a way. I'm going to develop the grit. I'm going to develop the determination. I'm going to find a way. George Washington was one of these presidents, by the way. His father died when he was very young. The family didn't have enough money to send him to college. Thomas Jefferson went to William and Mary. John Adams went to Harvard. George Washington, nah, he didn't go anywhere. He had to go find a job. He had to develop a profession. So he became a surveyor. And he started to, well, where in 1750 was all the land that hadn't already been surveyed? Well, it was in the West. So he came to the West, what we now call West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania. And he became familiar with a place he called the Forks, which we now call Pittsburgh, which became a strategic place in the French and Indian War because the French came and built a fort there. And they started building forts throughout Western Pennsylvania. And Governor Dinwiddie of Virginia told him, go tell the French to leave. And they, of course, replied, "You and what army are going to remove us?" And so the British sent 2 generals with 2 armies to kick the French out of the land that they claimed. And they needed a colonial who had experience in the Western lands. And so the militia colonel, 22-year-old George Washington, was invaluable to General Braddock and General Forbes as they came to this land, bringing British armies. So he established military credentials so that in 1776, when Congress was looking for a military commander for the new United States Army, he was the obvious choice. Is it possible that the difficult circumstance, if he had gone to William and Mary and he had the life of, he would have been running Mount Vernon, and he wouldn't have had developed a career, he wouldn't have the military experience, he wouldn't have the experience on the frontier. Often the things that you would think like, how can he ever recover from that? His life will be diminished because of these difficult circumstances he's had to work with. Sometimes that's exactly what equips you for the job that needs to be done. That's how Paul could say, when I am weak, then I am strong. Is it possible that sometimes God, knowing this, will intentionally allow you to experience a hard slog, a difficult mountain that has to be moved, that you can't move in your own strength? Would he even allow you to have to deal with an illness that leaves you in pain for long periods of time? And you wonder, Lord, you're praying, Lord, take this away. And he says, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. I'm going to leave this the way it is. Your gas tank is already full. I can't put any more in your tank. This weakness is part of my working in your life. Just when you think, Lord, you've abandoned me. Why you could just sweep this away, take this away from me. God's answer is, I allowed you to have it because it's part of my plan for you. That's not what we want to hear. Often it is how God chooses to work. Jesus was at his most weak when he was stripped naked and beaten and nailed to a cross. And that was how God won our victory. Do you understand? It was not in his strength. It was in his weakness. When I was in 7th grade, my parents moved to a new school district where I knew nobody. And went to school. 7th grade is not the easiest time to move to a new school district. Kids they've got their little crew that they feel comfortable with, and anybody that doesn't fit in their little, and I didn't fit in anybody's little team because I was brand new. I didn't know anybody. They're looking for, well, you're out there, and if you look weak, we'll pick on you. The first week of school, 3 boys from my neighborhood who were in my class came and knocked on my front door. My mother answered the door, and they said, "Would you send Bob out? We want to beat him up." We want to fight him. Nice neighborhood. And so my mother was a school teacher, and she knew, like, I can't say no because I know if they don't fight him here, they're going to jump him in the hallway. It'll be worse. She says, "Bob, you have to go out there and fight them." So she was tough, but she was right. I went out, faced the 3 guys. Fortunately, they decided not to all jump me at the same time. They decided to be gentlemen and fight me one at a time, tag team, So they unleashed, Bruno on me, the biggest guy who was a wrestler, and we tussled for 20 minutes in the grass, and neither one could win. He got exhausted. I was exhausted too. So he tagged out, and the next guy comes in who was bigger than he was. I'm like, I'm still exhausted. I don't get a chance to rest. So at this point, I was so furious. Like, what is going on here? And I thrashed the kid. He was crying in about 20 seconds. And the third boy didn't want any part of me. Okay, so in the tried and true tradition of junior high boys, they invited me to be their friend and sit at the lunch table with them. Okay, I thought I probably could do better for friends than this, but I'll start with this. And I decided at that point, I was an introvert. It was not easy for me to connect with people or make friends, and I just decided, I have to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn how to make friends. I'm going to connect with people that are different from me. I'm going to learn how to connect with people that I don't know at all. And I have spent the rest of my life doing that. I did that when I went to college. When I was, I've done mission work in Argentina and Brazil and Mexico and Great Britain, where I knew nobody. And God, would you and open doors and enable me to connect with people I don't even speak their language, and God did that. When I was at Family Guidance, I often would go and have a meeting with an inner city family in Homewood, and then go have lunch with a donor from Fox Chapel who had been supporting our work. I was going like this all over the place, meeting different kinds of people. I showed up at Homewood to meet that family, and I didn't know which apartment building. They didn't seem to be numbered. And I was just kind of wandering on the street. And as I was walking down the street, I was wearing a suit and tie, and I was a white guy. So I clearly wasn't from the neighborhood, And like there was this it was like a parade. People were following me, like, what's going on here? Who is this guy? Finally, I asked, there's a little boy there, and I said, like, can you tell me where the Smith family is? And he says, are you a policeman? Good question. And I said, no, I'm a friend of the family. I have a mentor that's coming to meet with the family. He said, oh, okay. All the rest of the neighborhood heard me. They all went about their business. Like, oh, okay. So he's not a policeman. It's not going to be there's nothing here to see. No action. There's not going to be any shooting or anything like that. But that was, ever since, I have been going places where I don't belong, and I've had to fit in. I found myself, about 15 years ago, I was leading some retreats for government leaders, the mayor, the county executive, some county officials, state legislators, all the congressmen from this region. We would go to a retreat center. We spent a weekend talking about Jesus and talking about your families and your work, and like that. Their world was a different world from my world. That was okay. God just, by this time, had shown me how to do that. I only recently have I kind of thought back on that experience in 7th grade. Like, I wonder if I would be able to do what I'm doing right now if I hadn't had 3 12-year-old boys knock on my door, want to fight me. Sometimes the things that you would not have chosen, and sometimes the thing that you're asking God, will you take this away from me? It's the very thing that God has brought into your life because he wants to do something extraordinary. He has already given you the grace of this experience because he is now equipping you to meet the challenges of the future. We don't realize it. We don't recognize it at the time. Is he worthy of your trust? Can you trust that that's exactly what he's doing with you? If he doesn't take it away, he has a purpose for it. I'm just going to wrap up here. A couple closing thoughts. Paul talks about, when I am weak, then I am strong. Often, I'll skip ahead. Is it possible that the Lord may choose to accomplish some significant things through our weakness? That he's choosing a jujitsu strategy. This is a martial art. Are you familiar with, typically in warfare, they come at you with their strength and you meet them with your strength. That's usually how it's done. In jujitsu, you let them come to you and you just stand there in weakness till they get to you. And then you kind of flop over. Oh, and you use their strength against them. They've got momentum coming, and then you just flip them, okay? Their strength becomes their weakness. Your weakness becomes your strength. God will often put you in a situation where he's using a jujitsu strategy. The ultimate expression of that, of course, was the cross itself, right? Where Jesus, stripped and nailed to a cross, died but rose again. He submitted to torture and to death on a hideous cross to have the victory over sin. Gideon, who had 3,000 men, and God said, "No, that's too many. You got to whittle it down to 300. Then you're ready." I don't think Gideon was too happy about that. He felt he wanted to go into battle in his strength, and God said, "No, it's going to be in weakness, because then you'll find that your strength is not the number of men you can send into battle. Your strength is my power, and my power is made perfect in your weakness." I'm going to read the rest of Mother Teresa's quote. "I don't think there is anyone who needs God's help and grace as much as I do. Sometimes I feel so helpless and weak. I think that is why God uses me. Because I cannot depend on my own strength, I rely on him 24 hours a day. If the day had even more hours, then I would need his help and grace during those as well." And Charles Spurgeon, "I have learned to kiss the waves that throw me up against the rock of ages." Is that powerful? When you find yourself in a weakened state and you are overwhelmed, it's okay to ask God, "Will you take this away?" And he may answer that prayer just the way you ask it. But if he does not, that does not mean he doesn't love you. He doesn't know what kind of situation you're in. Of course he does. The mere fact that he has allowed you to deal with this weakness may be part of his redemptive grace at work. The same God who can redeem us from, he redeems us from our sin. He can also redeem our circumstances. He can take evil and make good come from it. He can take our weakness and use jujitsu and turn it into a strength to accomplish his purposes in your life and through you. Do you believe that? When you are dealing with your next weakness, remember this. And after you're done pounding on the table, then ask Lord, ask him, "Lord, is this one of those times where you want to give me your grace through weakness? Then I will receive that from you." Yes, Rich, we have time for just one comment. Yeah.
Just another quote to add to it.
Sure.
We used to attend ACAC downtown.
Yeah.
And Rock Delavan had this one he used frequently. It was, "The knowledge of what awaits us sustains us."
What awaits us sustains us. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Rich. Yeah. Let's just bow for a word of prayer.